Hey everyone, thanks for being here and tuning in to this gripping revenge story on Revenge Argonne. Today's story unfolds in San Francisco. My name is Sarah, I'm 28, and I've spent the last 6 years building a quiet, independent life in a small but modern apartment in San Francisco. I pay my own bills, work long hours as a freelance graphic designer, and guard my space like it's the last piece of sanity I have. This isn't just where I live. It's the one place in the world where no one gets to tell me who I should be. At least, that's what I thought. That night, I came home later than usual, juggling my laptop bag and a grocery tote, already planning to collapse on the couch. But the second my key slid into the lock, something felt off. The door gave too easily, like it had been opened and closed just moments before. The lights inside were on. Voices drifted through the hallway. My muscles tensed. For one sharp, frozen heartbeat, I thought I'd been robbed. Then I turned the corner into my living room and stopped dead. Suitcases, cardboard boxes, clothes draped over my chairs, my parents standing there like they owned the place, and on my sofa, my younger sister, curled up with a blanket, like she'd lived there for years. "We used the spare key," my mom said, completely unfazed. "She's staying here for a while." No question, no warning, just a flat decision, delivered in my own living room. I wish I could say I stayed calm. I didn't. I told them this wasn't okay, that I worked from home, that they had no right. Dad's face hardened, that same look he used to give me when I was a teenager daring to say no. "Selfish," he snapped. Mom shook her head, disappointed, like I'd just failed some invisible family test. In that moment, something inside me clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an invasion, and I wasn't going to let it slide this time. Before I take you deeper into what I did next, and how far this went, do me a favor. Tell me what time it is for you right now, and where you're watching from in the comments. I want to see just how far this story about family, boundaries, and revenge can travel. I didn't grow up in a house where no was an acceptable answer. Saying no to extra chores, no to babysitting, no to changing my plans because someone else needed something, that was branded as selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. So as my dad's word, selfish, hung in the air, it wasn't just about that moment in my apartment. It was every time I'd bitten my tongue at 16, when my mom barged into my room without knocking, dumping laundry on my bed and saying, "Nothing in this house is truly private, Sarah." Standing there, staring at the boxes bleeding into my workspace, I felt that 16-year-old version of me again. Only now, this wasn't their house, it was mine. I paid the rent, I signed the lease. My name was on every bill. And yet somehow, they still believed they had the authority to rearrange my life like they were shifting furniture. "You can't just move in here," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "This is my home. You don't get to decide who lives with me without asking." Mom waved a hand like she was batting away a fly. "You're overreacting. She just needs a place to land for a while. You have a second bedroom? You're barely ever here anyway." I almost laughed at that. I was here all the time. I worked from home, ate here, slept here, brainstormed here. This wasn't some empty crash pad. It was my office, my sanctuary, my whole world compressed into a few hundred square feet. "Look," I said, feeling my jaw tighten. "I'm sorry she's having a hard time, but you don't get to copy my key, come in while I'm gone, and move her stuff in without telling me. That's not helping her. That's steamrolling me." My sister shifted on the couch, clutching a throw pillow like a life raft. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she murmured. "They said you'd understand. I thought you'd be okay with it." There it was, the familiar script. I'm the one who's doing fine, so I'm the one who has to absorb the hit. Take on the extra burden. Open the door. Swallow the resentment. For a second, I actually considered caving. letting them stay, telling myself it was just temporary. But my eyes drifted to my desk in the corner, my dual monitors, my drawing tablet, the sticky notes framing my deadlines. I pictured her blasting videos at 2 a.m., my mom reorganizing my kitchen for convenience, my dad parked in my chair watching TV while I tried to meet client deadlines. No, not this time. I slid my phone out of my pocket, my fingers moving almost on their own. I opened the camera app and hit record, angling it casually at my chest so they wouldn't notice right away. Their voices filled the room. My mom talking about family sacrifices. My dad ranting about kids these days. My sister softly crying into the blanket. Every word was proof that they hadn't just misunderstood. They'd decided my life was theirs to rearrange. Then I ended the recording, switched to the keypad, and dialed. "What are you doing?" Dad demanded, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "I'm calling the police," I said quietly. My throat was dry, but my voice barely shook. "You came into my home without permission. You're refusing to leave. That's trespassing." "Are you insane?" Mom snapped. "You're going to call the cops on your own family?" I looked straight at her. "I'm calling the cops on people who broke into my home with a copied key and tried to take it over. If that happens to be my family, that's on you." As the phone rang in my ear and the dispatcher picked up, I felt the old guilt trying to claw its way back up my spine. But under it, something stronger pulsed. Anger. Yes, but also clarity. I gave my address. I explained that my parents had entered without my consent, that they were trying to force my sister to move in. I told the dispatcher that I felt unsafe and needed officers to remove them from the premises. Hanging up, I leaned back against the wall and finally let my hands shake. "You really did it," my sister whispered, eyes wide. "You actually called them." I met her gaze. "I did," I said. "Because if I don't draw the line here, you're never going to stop crossing it." The dispatcher told me officers were on their way, but this wasn't TV. They didn't materialize in 5 minutes with dramatic sirens. Instead, I had 30 long, suffocating minutes trapped in my own apartment with 3 people who thought they still owned me. "Unbelievable," Dad muttered, pacing near the window, "calling the cops like some stranger. You've changed, Sarah." "No," I thought. "I just finally stopped pretending I hadn't noticed what you were doing." "You can still call them back," Mom said. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can talk this out like adults." "Adults don't break in with a copied key and move someone in behind their back," I replied. My voice was flat now, the adrenaline settling into something colder. "Adults ask. Adults respect the word no, even when they don't like it." Mom's lips thinned. "You never used to be so dramatic. When you were a teenager, we walked into your room to check on you all the time, and you never called it breaking in." "Yeah, huh?" The memory hit me so hard I almost staggered. I was 15, sitting on my bed, door closed, writing in a journal because it was the only place I could put thoughts I wasn't allowed to say. The door flew open without a knock. My mom scooped the notebook off my lap and started reading out loud. By the time she hit the page where I'd written, "Sometimes I wish I could disappear for a while just to see if they'd even notice," my dad was in the doorway calling me ungrateful. They'd grounded me for disrespect, taken my door off its hinges for a week, and never once apologized for violating my privacy. Back then, I'd wondered if I was the crazy one. Now, watching them pace my living room like they were waiting for a table at a restaurant, I realized I'd just been trained to doubt my own boundaries. "You're comparing this to us checking on you as a child?" I asked. "I'm almost 30. This is my lease, my name, my rent. You copied my key. You came in when I wasn't here. You started moving someone into my home without telling me. That's not checking in. That's a hostile takeover." Alexis sniffled from the couch. "Can we please not do this? I just need somewhere to stay for a bit. I already told my friends I'd be gone. I quit my lease." I burned my bridges. There it was. The part they hadn't said out loud. They'd made sure there was no backup plan. No other place she could go. Because if they'd left any door open, I might have closed mine. My phone buzzed, with a text from my best friend Lila. I'd sent her a short message right after hanging up with the dispatcher. They copied my key and tried to move Alexis in while I was gone. I called the cops. Her reply, "Good. Film everything. If they try to flip the story, you'll need proof. I can post a blurred clip on my private page if they gaslight you." I glanced at the video I'd already recorded, then opened the camera again and hit record a second time, letting it run. Mom complaining about kids who don't value family. Dad saying, "If you're going to act like a stranger, we'll treat you like one." Alexis whispering, "Please don't make them leave. They'll just come after me instead." I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it was tangled in anger, because the truth was, they already were coming after me. They just used her as the excuse. Time crawled. My chest felt tight, my skin hot, my thoughts oscillating between, what if the cops don't take this seriously? And what if they do? And this changes everything forever. Then, faint at first, I heard it. A distant siren, growing louder. Dad heard it too, his jaw clenched. "Last chance," he said. "You can tell them not to come." I walked to the door instead. "No," I answered. "Last chance for you to leave on your own." No one moved, so I opened the door and waited for the knock that would blow our family open. 2 officers stood in the hallway, a woman with sharp eyes and a man with a calm, tired expression that told me he'd seen this kind of mess before. I stepped aside to let them in, suddenly hyper-aware of the chaos, boxes stacked near the wall, an open suitcase spilling clothes. My dad's shoes kicked off like he lived there, my mom's purse on my kitchen counter. "Evening," the female officer said. "You the one who called?" "Yes," I replied, forcing my voice not to crack. "I'm Sarah. This is my apartment. They're my parents and my sister. They came in without my permission and are trying to move her in." Mom jumped in immediately. "We have a key," she said, as if that explained everything. "She gave it to us in case of emergencies. Our daughter is going through a crisis and we're just trying to help. This is a family matter, not a police matter." The male officer looked at me. "Did you give them a key?" "Years ago, when I first moved in," I said. "For emergencies, like if I lost mine or ended up in the hospital. I never gave them permission to copy it, and I never told them they could come in while I wasn't home or move someone in without asking me." "Did you copy the key?" the officer asked my parents. Dad hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to be obvious. "We had a duplicate made," he admitted, "but that's our daughter. This is our family. We're not strangers breaking in to steal anything." The female officer exhaled slowly. "Sir, having a copied key doesn't give you unlimited access. If she's the tenant and she's asking you to leave, and you're refusing, that's a problem." "I never refused to leave," Mom protested, voice rising. "I just said we needed to talk about this. She's kicking her own sister out on the street. What kind of person does that?" "The kind who needs to be able to work and sleep without people barging into her home," I said. My hands shook, but I didn't hide them. I told them to leave. They argued. They told me I was selfish. They insisted she was staying here. That's when I called you. "Do you have any documentation that this is your unit?" the male officer asked. "Yes," I replied, already halfway to my desk. I grabbed a folder with my lease, utilities, and ID, then brought it over. He skimmed the pages and nodded. "Okay," he said. "So you're the sole tenant on the lease?" "Correct." The female officer glanced at the boxes. "Has anything been damaged? Any threats made?" "Not physically," I said, "but they used a copied key to enter while I was gone, and they're ignoring me when I say no. I also have video of them admitting they moved her in without my consent, if that matters." Both officers turned a little sharper at that. "You recorded them?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I hit record when I walked in and realized what they'd done." "That'll help if this turns into a civil or criminal issue," she replied. "But right now, we're here to keep the peace and make sure everyone understands their rights." She turned back to my parents. "Here's the situation. Your daughter is the legal tenant. She's clearly stating she doesn't want you here and doesn't want her sister living here. If you refuse to leave, she can pursue this as trespassing, and we'll have to treat it as such. That could mean a formal report and potentially charges." Dad's face drained a shade. "Charges? For trying to help our own kid?" The male officer shrugged gently. "Intent isn't the only thing that matters. You don't get to override a legal tenant's wishes because you're related. That's not how this works." Alexis finally spoke, her voice small. "Please," she said, eyes glossy. "I already gave up my old place. I don't have anywhere else to go. I thought this was okay." "And that's not her fault," I said, nodding toward her. "It's yours. You set it up so I'd look like the villain if I said no. You knew if you pushed all the pieces into place, I'd be too guilty to undo it." The room went quiet. Even the officers seemed to feel the weight of that. The female officer broke the silence. "Here's what I need to know, Sarah. Do you want them to leave now?" I swallowed. This was the moment that would redraw the map of my entire family. "Yes," I said. "I want them all to leave, tonight. And I want it clearly understood that they're not to come back with that copied key." She nodded. "Okay. In that case, I'm formally advising all of you to gather your belongings and leave the premises. If you refuse, she can file a trespass report. Based on the statement and the video she mentioned, that could absolutely hold up." Mom stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're really doing this," she whispered. "To your own mother." "I'm doing this," I replied, "to the people who broke into my home and tried to take it away from me. If that includes my mother, that's because of what you did, not who you are." Dad shook his head, but his shoulders sagged. "This is going to tear the family apart." "It already was," I said softly. "You just didn't notice until I stopped letting it only tear me apart." The officers gave them a few minutes to pack. I watched as they closed up suitcases, folded clothes they'd dumped on my sofa, gathered stray chargers and toiletries that had already started to weave into my space. Every zipper sounded like a door slamming shut somewhere in my childhood. But under the sadness, there was something else. Relief. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being pushed out. Getting them out that night was only the first battle. The real war started after the officers left. The next morning, my phone blew up. Long messages from Mom about betrayal. Texts from Dad saying I'd humiliated them in front of strangers. A short, confused message from Alexis. "I get that you needed space, but did you really have to call the cops?" I stared at the screen, that old doubt clawing at me again. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I could have handled it privately. Maybe if I just sat them down and explained. Then I opened the video I'd recorded. Watched myself walk in, shocked. Heard my mom's casual, "She's staying here." My dad calling me selfish. Their voices flattening my boundaries like they were swatting away a fly. Number one, I hadn't overreacted. They had. Over and over. For years. This time, I just refused to play along. I booked a consultation with a tenant rights attorney that afternoon. We sat in a bland office that smelled like old paper and cheap coffee, while I slid my phone across the desk and let him watch the clips. "So they copied your key without permission," he summarized. "Entered while you weren't home, started moving someone in, and refused to leave when you asked. And you've got video of them admitting all that, plus the officers responding." "Yes." He nodded. You're well within your rights to file a formal trespass complaint and send them a cease and desist. Depending on how aggressive you want to be, we can also pursue a no-contact order regarding your apartment, something that makes it crystal clear they are not allowed to use any copy of that key again. If they violate it, it's not just a family fight. It's a legal violation with teeth. Do I have to take them to court? I asked. Not necessarily, he said. Sometimes, just receiving a letter from a law office is enough to shock people into reality. We can lay out the facts and the consequences clearly. Think of it as a legal boundary. They either respect it or deal with the fallout. The word boundary made something settle inside me. A boundary that didn't depend on whether they understood or agreed. A boundary that could exist even when they thought I was being selfish. We drafted the letter together. It was brutally factual, stripped of emotion. It described the unauthorized key duplication, the non-consensual entry, the attempted move-in, the officer's response. It warned that any further unauthorized entry or harassment regarding my living situation would result in formal charges. It also included something else I requested, a demand for reimbursement of my legal consultation and the lock change I'd already scheduled, plus compensation for the day of work I'd lost dealing with their stunt. If they want to treat you like a resource, my attorney said dryly, they can pay like they're using one. I almost laughed. For the first time in days, it felt good. While the letter made its way to their mailbox, I made another decision. I sent one of the shorter clips, the one where my mom said, "We copied your key. This is family. You don't get to say no." And my dad snapped, "Selfish," to Lila. Faces blurred, audio intact. "Post this on your private account," I told her. Caption it something like, POV. Your parents copy your key and move someone into your apartment while you're gone because family. No apology, just calling you selfish when you object. Am I overreacting? Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I said. Just your private circle. I want to see how people outside our bubble react. She posted it. Within an hour, her notifications were blowing up. Comments pouring in from people who didn't know me personally, but knew the pattern in their bones. This is exactly why I went no contact. They didn't help you, they invaded you. Parents like this think their kids are property. Change your locks yesterday. Reading them, I felt something unhook deep inside me. For so long, I'd been told my feelings were too much, too sensitive, too dramatic. Seeing dozens of strangers line up on my side made it harder for those old lies to stick. When my parents finally received the lawyer's letter, the explosion was immediate. My mom called, voice shaking with rage. I let it go to voicemail. "How dare you threaten us with legal action?" she hissed into the recording. "After everything we've done for you? We are your parents. We don't need your permission to care about your life. This is disgusting, Sarah. You've let outsiders get into your head." Then my dad. "You want to play hardball? Fine. You think the rest of the family won't hear about how you called the police on us? How you're demanding money from your own parents? You'll be the one who looks bad, not us." I listened to both messages twice, then forwarded them, along with the lawyer's letter, to a group chat with some extended relatives who'd always taken their side by default. No commentary, just facts. Then I typed one message. "If you're going to hear about this story, you're going to hear the whole thing. They copied my key, broke into my home, tried to move my sister in while I wasn't there, refused to leave, and called me selfish when I objected. I called the police and got legal help so it never happens again. If that makes me the villain in their version, I'm fine with that. But this is my version. The true one." Within minutes, a cousin replied privately, "Honestly? Good for you. They've done this boundary trampling thing for years. They're just mad it finally cost them something." For the first time, I wasn't the one losing everything to keep the peace. This time, they were the ones paying the price. If you were me, would you have gone this far or further? Comment justice if you think they deserved every inch of this pushback. Drawing a hard line with your family doesn't just change the relationship, it changes the story they tell about you. As the weeks passed, I became the villain in group chats I wasn't in, the ungrateful daughter, the cold sister who chose an apartment over family. I only knew because a few relatives quietly sent screenshots, the digital equivalent of whispering, "Hey, they're talking about you behind your back. Thought you should know." In their version, I'd kicked my sister out onto the street. In reality, my parents moved her back into their house the same night the officers escorted them out of mine. They just conveniently left that part out. I didn't reach out. Not at first. I focused on practical things. Changed my locks. Paid the lawyer. Saved his number in my phone. Installed a security camera that actually notified me if anyone tried to mess with my door again. Then, because the universe has a sense of humor, a client discovered one of Lila's posts, another blurred clip she'd shared anonymously from our original video, and reached out with a different kind of proposal. "This might sound weird," they wrote, "but we're launching a mental health campaign about boundaries and family systems. Your story is intense, but real. Would you ever consider letting us use a fictionalized version in an animated explainer?" We'd pay, obviously. I stared at the email for a long time. The same experience that had nearly shattered me was suddenly valuable. We worked out a deal. I retained control over how much personal detail was included. Names and faces were changed, and in exchange, I got a decent check and creative control over the visual direction. I spent late nights designing scenes, a small figure standing in a crowded living room, relatives towering over them, the walls closing in, a key splitting into two in slow motion to represent the copied key. I poured every tight-chested memory into frames and storyboards. By the time we were done, the project wasn't just work. It was alchemy, turning something raw and ugly into something someone else might watch and think, "Oh, I'm not crazy. That's abuse, not caring too much." Meanwhile, my parents' campaign of guilt ramped up. They sent photos of family dinners with empty chairs. "Wish you were here," the captions read. "If you could just apologize, we could all move past this." Apologize. For defending my home. For saying no. For choosing my mental health over their control. I didn't respond. Then, weeks later, a message from Alexis popped up out of nowhere. "I moved out," she wrote. "I'm not at mom and dad's anymore." I hesitated before replying. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm at a women's transitional shelter," she answered. "It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I have chores and curfews, but no one walks into my room without knocking. No one copies my key." I had to listen to a counselor lecture me about enabling our parents, but she wasn't wrong. I stared at the words "our parents" and felt a strange twist in my chest. Not mom and dad, not my parents, our parents. A small linguistic rebellion. "Did they kick you out?" I asked. "Not exactly," she replied. "They just kept talking about how you owe us, how I should have convinced you to let me stay, how I made them look bad by crying in front of the cops." I realized, if I stayed, I'd just be the weapon they use against you. So I left. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not just the one who needs rescuing. For a long time, I didn't type anything. Then, "I'm proud of you," I wrote. "And I'm sorry I couldn't be your landing pad this time. I couldn't survive that and stay sane." "I know," she texted back. "Honestly, watching you draw a line is the only reason I realized I could draw one too. We didn't magically become best friends after that." She had to do her own work. I had to keep doing mine. But that message shifted something. My selfish boundary hadn't just protected me. It had quietly opened a door for her too. Months passed. My life didn't turn into a movie montage of perfect healing and endless sunshine. Some days I still woke up with my heart pounding, convinced I'd hear a key in the lock that shouldn't be there. Some nights I scrolled through old photos and wondered if I'd overcorrected, if there was a gentler way I could have handled it. But then I'd remember the look on my dad's face when he called me selfish for not immediately sacrificing my home. The casual way my mom said, "She's staying here," like my opinion was an optional accessory. The way they tried to weaponize guilt and extended family against me when the law didn't bend in their favor. And I'd feel the answer settle in my gut. No, there wasn't a gentler way that would have worked. Not with people who only hear no when it's backed by consequences. The animated video I'd worked on eventually went live on my client's channel. It never mentioned my name or specific details, but the core was unmistakable to anyone who knew. A young adult whose parents copied her key and breached her home for her own good. A boundary drawn in police lights and legal language. A resolution that didn't end in a hug, but in a quiet, chosen distance. The comments were brutal and beautiful. I cried watching this. I thought I was the only one whose parents treated my house like an extension of theirs. No one tells you that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is call the cops on people who share your DNA. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your no. I didn't reply, but I read every line. Each one felt like a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I knew by heart, but hadn't saved under any name. Just digits. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. No voicemail, just an unanswered attempt. I blocked the number. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. I knew exactly what that call would contain. Tears, accusations, half apologies wrapped around demands. We'd danced that dance my whole life. I'd finally stepped off the floor. I wasn't going back. Instead, I lit a candle, opened my laptop, and started writing this. My revenge diary. Not because I want them to hurt, though they have. They lost access to my home, my day-to-day life, my automatic yes. They lost the version of me who would quietly rearrange herself to fit whatever role they needed in the moment. No, this is revenge in a different sense. Revenge as reclamation. As saying, you don't get to control the narrative anymore. You don't get to decide whether what you did was no big deal. I do. If you're watching this, maybe you see pieces of your own story here. Maybe your parents forward your mail without asking, show up unannounced, pressure you to give up your room, your time, your money, your body, your peace. Because family. Maybe every time you try to protest, you're told you're overreacting, ungrateful, dramatic. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it. If the price of keeping your family happy was sacrificing your freedom, your safety, and your sanity, would you pay it forever? Or would you, just once, choose yourself, even if it meant they walked out of your life? Tell me in the comments, would you have called the police? Would you have gone to a lawyer? Would you have changed your locks? Sent the letter? Blocked the number? Or would you still be trying to keep the peace in a war that only you seem to be bleeding in? Whatever your answer is, I hope you remember this. You are not selfish for expecting basic respect. You are not cruel for wanting your own space. And sometimes, the bravest, most brutal act of love you can show yourself is to close the door and not open it again. If you're still here with me, listening all the way to the end, thank you. Drop a boundary or freedom in the comments so I know you made it this far. And if you want more real, messy, unapologetic stories like this about revenge, healing, and choosing yourself, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay tuned. The next story might be the one that finally gives you permission to walk away. Our team at Revenge Argon is dedicated to creating powerful, meaningful storylines that reflect real emotional struggles while staying completely fictional. These family revenge stories are crafted solely to share lessons, inspire reflection, and deliver valuable knowledge in an educational and responsible way for our viewers. I think the way Sarah handled this situation was tough, but necessary. She protected her home, her mental health, and finally drew a clear line after years of having her boundaries ignored. She chose legal, calm, and firm action instead of staying silent and sacrificing herself for family. If you were in her place, would you have done the same, or would you handle this family drama differently?